Hello, Revenant fans and potentially fellow theorists. It's me, the Revenant Theorist, and in today's video, I'm going to try to solve the mystery of where Revenant takes place, and also, or basically it's the same thing, where Camp Hope is. I know it may not seem like there's not, much to go off of based on the fact that we only have a trailer and a few TikToks from Sling and Stone Studios. But I actually have a pretty strong theory, and I believe that we can figure out exactly where Camp Hope actually is. Really quickly, I just want to state that if you're enjoying the content so far, then please make sure to like and subscribe, and comment any theories of your own that you may have regarding this game, as I love to just think there's other people theorizing about this, and I'm not just crazy. Another quick mention is that these theories are based on the upcoming game Revenant by Sling and Stone Studios, and their channel will be mentioned in the description, as well as the Steam page for Revenant. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so the first piece of evidence we're going to be looking at comes from the trailer for this game, specifically the newspaper that talks about the original outbreak and the CDC's response to it. So the first thing that we notice about this newspaper is that it's titled The Forestry Times. So we know that this newspaper was written in an area with lots of forest. This may not seem like an important piece of evidence, but I believe the developer wouldn't have included this bit about the Forestry Times if it wasn't relevant to the setting of the story. I believe that this newspaper was written near or even in Camp Hope, because in the trailer, this newspaper appears to be on a wooden table very similar to the one seen in a later scene in the trailer. And also, if you look at the bottom right in this scene that shows the newspaper, as it zooms out, you can see a floor that's different from the table, which confirms it's, a table, and it's actually on a table. But what's important to note is that this same flooring and potentially even the same table can also be seen later in the trailer when we venture into Camp Hope's cabins and we see a shelf and a lantern on it, and also looks to be two tables on each side. But also, like, the flooring, if you see, like, there's one split second at the end of the scene that you can see the flooring for that room, and it looks exactly like the flooring we see in the newspaper scene. And also, the newspaper could even have been like where the lantern is sitting now. It's the same, type of, I can't think of the word, established environment. Yeah, I'm just going to go with that. Same table and stuff. But yeah, so now that we know that the newspaper is likely a local one, we can process the information that's on it. A minor but important piece of information to note is that the newspaper is dated June 30th, 2025. This date allows us to get a rough guess of what the weather would be like in places around that time period. Then the next major piece of evidence after that we'll be looking at are the three states mentioned in this newspaper, those being Arizona, Florida, and New York. Because these three are the only ones we hear about, and also because Camp Hope may actually be related to the initial outbreak, it's reasonable to assume that Camp Hope is located in one of these states. The next piece of information we can use is the line, quote, local law enforcement reports suggest a terrifying progression in a small number of patients, end quote. This line sticks out to me because I theorized in my last video that heat speeds up and the virus and its effects. This implies that the local law enforcement are dealing with patients in a warmer area where the virus is progressing at a faster rate. This information would be helpful if it wasn't for the fact that because it's, still summer when this newspaper comes out, it would be, warm everywhere, making it seemingly impossible to pinpoint an exact area. Whereas, if it was sometime like the winter time, it'd probably be easier to determine. But the next piece of evidence from the newspaper helps us to solve this, is it gives us the quote, witnesses from Phoenix and Miami have described victims suddenly snapping into fits of extreme feral aggression, end quote. I believe that this piece of evidence eliminates Florida and Arizona from being contenders for where Camp Hope takes place. I believe that because we hear about only two major cities from the three contenders, then that means that these cities may be far or even distant from where this is being written at. I'm not sure how to explain it, like, the best that I can, but New York City, or a city in New York, being left out implies that it's being written inside of New York, because it doesn't mention anything about a New York City, which means that the audience or the local people who are reading it might already know what's happening, and they're using this to compare it to other places. And now the next piece of evidence that I have that supports the New York theory is the line, quote, "Police in upstate New York have placed a small nursing facility under complete lockdown following another, quote, mass casualty event," end quotes. This line is strong evidence for this New York theory because there's a saying in New York that only New Yorkers know where upstate truly begins or truly is. And I don't know this because I'm not from New York, but that's just what I've heard. And this implies that it's being written in New York for New Yorkers. And also the photo being taken in New York that we see in this newspaper can also support the fact that maybe someone on the Forestry Times reporter team may have went and captured a photo of this event for the news. And also, based on the evidence that this newspaper gives us, I do believe that New York is the clear favorite for where Camp Hope takes place. The lack of a major city in New York being listed, even though New York was listed as a breakout state, implies that New York is more local to newspaper than the other locations, which means it's probably based in there. And this also explains why the story told about the violence is something that happened in New York, because it's something that they would have access to, something they'd have information about. And also the fact that instead of a city being listed, the reporter stated upstate, because, that's something New Yorkers would know. The next piece of evidence to look at when it comes to determining a location is the environment that the trailer itself depicts. Now, upon first glance, the trailer itself doesn't seem to give us much information because it's just, your typical wooded environment you'd see at a summer camp. But if you look at one scene in particular, you will see a hand reaching for an apple. This may not seem important at first glance, but this is a groundbreaking piece of information. You see, apples, they don't tend to grow in a lot of places, and a lot of places aren't popularly, known for growing apples. A few of these places that aren't popular for growing apples or known for them happen to be Florida and Arizona. This knocks off 2 out of the 3 states given to us, which, that in itself should confirm New York, but even if it doesn't, New York is the second largest producer of apples in the United States. And you know what they say, apples never lie. And the apples are telling us that New York is the state where this summer camp is. The next piece of evidence that we're going to be looking at to, help pinpoint an exact location is a TikTok posted by Sling & Stone Studios. In this TikTok showing off the progress on the game so far, we can see 2 lakes separated by a dam in the hilly wooded area. Using this topography, I believe I have a location for Camp Hope. I believe that Camp Hope is located in Lake Placid in the Adirondack Mountains. I just butchered that probably. In Essex County in New York. Specifically, I believe that the lower lake is Paradox Bay and the upper lake is East Lake. The TikTok appears to show the upper lake splitting into 2 separate pathways, 2 separate directions, and that part of East Lake that is closest to Paradox Bay matches that exact topography, I believe, based on what we see, because we don't see the full area. We just see a little chunk of it. So based on what we know, this checks off what we know so far, because also I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the area in the trailer is shown to be wood or hilly, and mountains, they're pretty hilly, I believe. Yeah. The only really hole I see in it is the fact that Essex County, I'm not entirely sure if it's considered upstate or not, because I'm not from New York, but everything else checks out, because people do tend to camp out in Lake Placid like we see in this game. This could also help explain our character's survival to this point, because the virus probably hasn't rampaged New York as badly as somewhere like Miami and Phoenix because of the heat difference. Because Miami and Phoenix are way hotter than New York typically is during the summer. So this would explain that the virus would have progressed way quicker in other warmer environments compared to just New York, because New York is a cooler environment. This would allow our character, to have some time to prepare or survive, and the progression would be slower in New York. So yeah, in conclusion, I theorize that Camp Hope and the game of Revenant take place inside of Lake Placid and the Adirondack Mountains in Essex, New York, and Lower Lake and Upper Lake are Paradox Bay and East Lake, respectively. If you've enjoyed this theory, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any different theories, make sure to comment them below, as I would love to hear what you guys think. As always, that's just a theory. Thanks for watching. This has been the Revenant Theorist, signing out.